Hello guys, this is Kishan and this video is to understand cursors, PLSQL cursors. So before we start understanding cursors, let me tell you there are basically two types of cursors, implicit cursor and explicit cursor. Implicit cursor are executed whenever we write a select statement which returns one row. Say suppose when I write department ID is equal to 10 in a PLSQL block, when I write something like select staff from employee where department ID is 10, only one row is returned. So what PLSQL engine will do is it will implicitly open, parse the SQL statement, bind the SQL variables, execute the statement, fetch the result and close the cursor. This is a basic cursor life cycle. So what happens is if we are executing a PLSQL block that has if in a query in a PLSQL block that returns only one row, such as here over here I have executed, I am putting this select statement where I take first name and last name into two different variables from an employee table where department ID is set in a variable. Over here I am setting 10. As we know, department ID 10 has only one row. Just I executed that query and I'm catching the exceptions below here. So when I execute this block, it gets successfully executed and I get the output because there is only one row to execute. Oracle did used an implicit cursor and gave me an output. But what when there are multiple rows to be executed? Say suppose what happens when I execute the same PLSQL block for something like where department ID is 20, where there are multiple rows in the table. So when I do that, let's see what happens. I'm giving a department ID as 20 in this variable which is used by the query, and when I execute this I get something like I have cached the exception over here, like an exception raised with the SQL ERRM. SQL ERRM is basically a variable that stores the SQL error message whenever an error has occurred. Similarly, there is something called as SQL code. So when we execute this, we get something like exception raised ORA 01422, exact fetch return more than requested number of rows. So now coming to the second type of cursors, which are called explicit cursor, and which we have to, as a developer, we have to open them, fetch them and close them. When we want to work with a set of records where there are more than one records to be worked on, we have to use cursors. So as we can understand by this, it is a very day-to-day thing that we have to use. So going to the definition, a cursor is a pointer to this context area. It is nothing, just a pointer, not the pointer which we have in C where it's not that cursor. It's just a pointer to this context area. Now PLSQL controls the context area through a cursor. This is another way how we can define a cursor. The third type is a cursor holds the rows, one or more, written by the SQL statement. One or more, when it holds one row, it would be an implicit cursor. More than one row, it would be an explicit cursor, which we have to take care. Now please do understand that it just holds the rows. It does not stores the data, or it does not, it's not a storage area. It's just a pointer to the context area. It stores nothing. It just points to an area which SQL has provided us. Okay, so let me show you a basic explicit cursor. Now there are two ways through which you can use explicit cursor, and the first one is simple: open, fetch and close. Over here we will be opening the cursor, fetching the rows into variable and then closing the cursor. And the other way is a cursor for loop. We'll just look into that in a few seconds, but before that we'll understand this. So what happens here is, to declare a cursor, you need to write something as cursor variable name is and then the select statement. So over here I'm not putting any where clause. So all the rows in the employees table I'm considering. There are about 107 rows. So what I'm doing is I'm declaring the cursor variable is the select statement. Simple as that. You have declared the cursor. It has to be declared in the declare section if there's a PLSQL block. And then I have declared a variable. I have declared a row type variable because, as you can see, I have taken star over here. So I'm getting all the columns. So when you are working with all the columns, you should basically just declare a simple row type variable. What happens with a row type variable is it will store the complete row of the employees table. So if the employee structure has 10 columns, it will just simply hold all the 10 columns in it. But if you are say working with just one or two variables, as in this case, you should explicitly declare these variables, like I have declared over here. Like I'm storing the first name and last name into two variables called as f name and p last name. Then you have to declare it over here, and I have declared it as a type, like table name dot column name percentage type. So this way, what the advantage we get by declaring with percentage type is, say suppose tomorrow the structure of employee table changes. Say suppose f name, the first name column is increased from size 10 to size 15, and you have declared over here statically such as varchar to 10, and then the size is increased to 15. Say your query might fail. You might get a name that is a 15 characters and your query might fail. But if you have declared the variable this way, then what would happen is, if whenever the the data type of first name changes in the employees table, it will same way reflect over here. So this query would execute even if the data type is increasing. The procedure might be compiled again, and the new data type will come into effect. So this is a very good way of declaring variables. So yeah, coming back to where we were. So as you can see over here, I'm just taking the two things into one variable, and over here I need the complete row. So I have declared a percentage row type. So quick recap: percentage row type is would store all the columns of a particular table, and percentage type table name dot row column name percentage type would just have the data type of that particular column. So with the cursors, what we have to do is, first of all, after declaring the cursor in the declare section, we have to open the cursor. Over here we are opening the cursor. Just a second. So open cursor name. That's it. The cursor is open now. We can work with the cursor. Second thing we need to do is we need to fetch the cursor variable into some locally declared variable. Over here I have taken the row type row emp variable. So row type row underscore emp. Say suppose if I would have some static something like employee ID over here, then I would have just simply declared employee ID here as a simple variable. As this percentage type, and I would have just declared into this variable employee. Say suppose this is p underscore employee ID, I would have just taken this over here and executed it. But as over in my case, I'm taking star. I would have taken employee ID, would have stored it in a particular variable like this, fetch cursor into the variable. But over here we will be just working with stars, as we want all of the data from the table. So fetch cursor into row type, and then I'm just printing the first name out of that row type. I'm just putting row type dot the first name, and and then at the end you have to close the cursor. Always to close the cursor, because it consumes memory. It will be holding memory unless you close it. So we, in an explicit cursor, we would be doing all the three steps. That is, declare. First of all, we're declaring the cursor, then we are opening the cursor. The next step we are doing is we are fetching the required data into variables, and at the end we would close the cursor. So we're doing that. So all this three steps will be open, fetch, and close. This is one way of working with cursor. Let me just execute this. As you can see, what has happened is this SQL statement is executed, and whatever data we have got, that is fetched into this variable. I am just taking the first name out of it and printing it on the screen to show you. So as you can see, first name Steven. The first row it got is Steven. Now say suppose like, hey, if you want to just do this, we can just put it into a variable and use it, right? So now let's how we will work with all the rows. Like if I want to print all 107 variables, what will we do? We'll do something like this. After opening the cursor, we'll loop. We will loop and we will fetch all the variable one after the other. The loop will execute one after the other into this into the variable, and then we would exit it when we have no the cursor does not contain any data. There is cursor name percentage not found. This percentage not found is a cursor attribute. We'll look into it in some matter. Just it's like whenever the cursor has data, percentage not found would return false. If the cursor does not have any more data to show, this percentage not found, cursor name percentage not found would give us true, and just we would come out of the loop. We would go to the end loop and we'll close the cursor. So what we will do is we will be executing this PLSQL block, and let's see what happens. As we can see, all of the employees, all 107 employees, are being printed because we used the for loop, and we exited when no more data is found. So all 107 rows are printed over here. So this was working with open fetch and close with a loop inside. Just one more thing I would like to mention over here is that every time we execute the fetch statement, it would go to the next row. Like for the first fetch statement, it is on the first row that is executed. On the next fetch statement, it will go to the next row. Like let's see, over here I keep two fetch statements, say suppose, and if we execute this block, what would happen is the first fetch statement would get the first row into the variable. The second fetch statement would take the second row into this variable. As you can see, the first row coming is Steven and second row coming is Nina. So if you write it, the third one, again the third variable will be coming. So that is it. So that is working with cursor open, fetch and close. Now coming to cursor attributes, there are basically 4 cursor attributes which we are provided, which we can work with. Like the first one being is open. Is open returns true if the cursor is open. After this open statement, after opening the cursor, if we write like if you want to do, like if you want to check whether the cursor is open or not, we can just simply use this is open and it would return true only after the open statement. And the second thing is row count, like what number of how many numbers of rows are there, or which number of row is currently being used. Or at the end of the cursor, if we execute this, we will get the total number of rows which are affected by the particular cursor. So that is the row count. The third one is not found and not found. Found is like whenever the cursor executes and if it finds the data, found will return as true. Otherwise it would return null. Not found would always return true when there is no more data for the cursor. Like if the cursor is has executed all its loop and now it's empty, then the not found would be true, otherwise it will be false. So now as we can see over here, we have exited the loop when there is no more data, like exit when cursor emp percentage not found, like exit when this is true, and this would be true when there is no more data to use, right? So that is the way we can use this found, not found as open. Many times you will for percentage row count, like how many number of rows have been affected by the particular cursor, and these attributes are really useful. Now let's see an example where we have used this attributes just for our understanding. Like see over here, I have written this if cursor emp, the same cursor which we are using. If the cursor is open after the fetch statement, we would just simply print on screen something like the cursor is open. Then we would fetch an employee and record the first row into a percentage row type variable. If the data is found, it would return the records are found in the cursor, and the row count will give us which number of row we are working on. After the fetch statement, like if after the execution of first fetch statement, it will give the row count as 1. And then we'll print the first name and we'll close the cursor just to see the cursor attributes working. Like as we can see, after open cursor emp is open, returned true. Because it returned true, it went inside the if statement and returned the cursor is open, as we can see. Then we have fetched the record, and if we have found, like if the cursor variable percentage found is true, then it returns record found in the cursor. and then we have taken the row count, like it's the first record. So the row count is 1. Only one record has been fetched and only one record is updated. So row count is not the number of rows returned by the cursor, it is number of rows affected. How many are fetched, how many are processed, how many are looped. The row count would be returning that number. We should not confuse it with the count, like select count of one from a table, because those count is something different. And we've written the first name. So this is cursor attributes. There are many different ways in which they can be very much helpful. Like there can be cases like we are not sure whether cursor is open or not, and in that case this would be helpful to find out, like percentage EMP percentage is open, will come to know whether the cursor is open or not, and then use it. So these are basic cursor attributes. Now the most easy and the most performance wise also a very good way to use cursor is using them in a cursor for loop. And this should be always our intent to use this cursor for loops rather than opening, fetching and closing the cursor. Over here what we are doing is, after declaring the cursor, we just write for variable, anything, for I, for k, for j, for row, whatever, for row in cursor name, whatever we have defined over here. After doing this, what happens is internally it would open the cursor and start fetching. When I write something like dbms output put underscore line row dot first name, like I even don't, there's no need to declare a variable to fetch the output of the cursor into something and printing from there. It's just like whatever I kept here, I can use it, like row dot first name. And what it does, it would, for select star from employee, whatever, this cursor would be opened, this rows would be selected, and it would return me the first name. It would open the cursor, fetch the variables, fetch the output into this variable, and just close the cursor after the using. So here it is, as we can see, it returns everything. It's a very efficient way of using the cursor, and it should be always preferred whenever we are working with cursors. So open fetch, instead of open fetch and close, this is for loop cursor, the most used. Now one more way we can using is, if we are not declaring this cursor over here, say suppose I'm not writing this cursor thing, I'm just simply writing such as open row in this one, and I'm executing it. Let's see what happens. When we write this way and execute, it works. Either we as I did before, was I declared this statement as a cursor in the declared statement and then use the cursor name at this place. And the other way I did is I just write the select statement over here. But many times you need to work with the cursor for more times. You're in a particular block, you're opening and closing it in more than one time. Then if it is declared above, you don't need to write that query every time. You can just use the cursor name and carry on. So that is a way it is better to just declare the cursor above. And now let's see something called as a parameterized cursor. Like, what if I don't want a particular select query to run every time? What if there is a where clause to be used? Like in those cases, like select star from employee where department ID is passed by the procedure. It's not static, it's not 10 or 20 every time, it is passed by the procedure. So as you can see, what I did over here is I have declared the cursor, and I have written I have given a where clause to it, where like department ID is equal to p department ID. So whatever I'll be passing to the procedure would be coming here. The variable would be coming here. There's something called as parameterized cursor, where you don't hard code anything, where it's at the runtime whatever is being passed to the procedure will be used. So let's see if this procedure is, I already compiled it. It's there now. Let's execute this procedure. First of all, I pass something like 20 into it. So when I pass 20, it shows me output. It's like department ID 20 and the first name what I got. It's it's a for loop. So all the number of employees it found, it would have printed. Say suppose if I give department ID 30, then it would give all the employees for department ID 30. So as you can see, something is also very much useful, parameterized cursor, where you don't hard code the thing and where the variable is passed into the cursor statement. So this is it. This is about cursors. Basically, to summarize it, there are two types of cursors, implicit and explicit. Implicit are taken care by Oracle, it open, fetches, closes everything on its own, and the others are our the others are our explicit cursor, where the programmer itself would open the cursor, fetch the records and close it. And there are two ways to use explicit cursor, one being explicitly opening the cursor, fetching the variables and then closing it, and the other being the cursor for loop, which is very much better whenever we have to work with cursor. And cursor variables, the four types which we can use is open, found, row count, found, not found. Also, this cursor attributes are even can be used with implicit cursors. Like whenever you write a select statement, it's an implicit cursor, so there is something is open, but is open for an implicit cursor will always be false, because as soon as you write a select statement, it's executes, so it's Oracle will do open, fetch and close. So when if you write is open, it would just simply return you false every time. But that is not the count with the row count. You can if you write a DML statement like select star from departments. So as soon as after executing this, if you write something, if you want to see the row count, you have to write something like SQL percentage row count. SQL percentage row count is like whenever there is an implicit cursor working, you have to write SQL in front of it. Whenever there is a explicit cursor you are working, you have to write the name of the cursor. So in our case, it was something like CUR row percentage row type. So this is it. So this is all about cursors. Thank you for watching this video. Please do let me know about what you think in the comments. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you very much.